Welcome back to Punk Rock Theologian. Today, I want to look into a fairly familiar story from Jesus' life, just to point out some things that I've fairly recently noticed with it. And mostly it's questions I don't really have answers for, but I think this is the right way to read the Bible is to find these questions and take time to consider them. The story is of a man named Jairus and his daughter. You can find it in Mark 5 and Luke 8. I'll be working from Mark's version mostly, which starts in verse 22, saying, Then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived. When he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. My little daughter is dying, he said. Please come and lay your hands on her. Heal her so she can live. We don't know why she's dying. We don't know how long she's been sick, but we do know that Jairus is kind of desperate here. But what's interesting is we don't know how he found Jesus. Based on the fact that we're about to see Jesus walk with him to his house in a fairly short amount of time, we know he didn't make some long journey to track Jesus down. Which made me wonder, did he even track Jesus down, or did he just stumble across him? Did he come running up to him out of breath and desperate, or did he just bump into Jesus but seize the opportunity when it happened? We don't really know. What we do know is Jesus agrees to go with him, but before they can make much headway, Jesus stops because someone touched him. And the whole story comes out that this woman who had been bleeding for years snuck through the crowd, touched Jesus, she's been healed. And it's a great story in its own right. But to Jairus' perspective, it's nothing but an interruption. It's a delay. His daughter is at death's door, and Jesus is standing here talking to this other woman. And all Jairus wants is to get to his daughter. While they're standing around, delayed by this other woman, some people come from the house and tell him that it's too late. His daughter has died. Which makes the next crazy part in verse 36. It says, Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, Don't be afraid, just have faith. This is another one of those things that it's easy for us to read it on this end of things. We're not Jairus. We know how this story works out, but in the midst of it, can you imagine being him? Not only did you just get the news that your daughter has died, but he is fully confident that Jesus could have healed her, but we got hung up with this other lady and didn't make it in time. This seems to be kind of a thing with Jesus. You see it in the story of Lazarus in John 11, and it's the same thing that happens here. Jesus flat out ignores this news that the daughter has died, the exact same way he ignored the fact that he knew Lazarus had died. And in the next verse says Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. It's another one that I've just read past so many times, but why not the rest of them? And I suppose maybe you don't take a big crowd into this guy's house, especially when it's a house that they're grieving because the daughter just died. It could be a courtesy thing. But imagine being some of the other disciples. What is it like to be left behind? That you just watched this whole thing with the woman that was healed. We all heard the news, the daughter's dead, but Jesus said, Don't worry about it, have faith. Surely something is about to happen and you get left behind and don't get to go. Man, what would that be like? So they get to the house, and verse 39 says, He went inside and asked, Why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead, she's only asleep. Which is a weird thing to say, but once again, it's the same thing he said about Lazarus. In John 11:11, he had told his disciples, Lazarus has fallen asleep, and had to come back in verse 14 and tell them, No, I mean Lazarus is dead. This same terminology of sleeping is how Paul describes believers dying later in the New Testament. Perhaps this is what Jesus is talking about. He might be revealing kind of a deeper reality, but there might be something else going on here. You skip ahead, he goes in, wakes her up very casually, just tells her little girl, get up. And then verse 43 says Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone what had happened. And then he told them to give her something to eat. Imagine being this girl's parents. You've just had your heart ripped out when your daughter dies. And then Jesus comes and brings her back to life, gives her back to you, but tells you not to tell anyone that it happened. I can't imagine trying to keep that a secret, trying to keep that news to myself. And also, I have to kind of wonder if maybe this is part of why he told the crowd that the girl was just sleeping. He's telling them not to spread the word that she was dead and brought back to life. And so, this whole she's just asleep thing kind of minimizes the scene so that when people now see her alive and well again, they'll go, oh, I guess she was just sleeping. Then that feels really strange because it's like, is Jesus telling the truth or not? So, like I said, I don't have a neat little moral and this all tied up in a bow. I just found that this story is a lot more personal and a lot more confusing than I've ever seen. When you put yourself in this, when you imagine being a real person experiencing these things, it is mind blowing. The only thing I can say for sure is that Jesus saw beyond what everybody else saw. He looked past the interruptions and the delays and the bad news and even death. Jesus looked beyond the facts and operated on faith, led and empowered by the Holy Spirit. And that's the same life he calls us to live. And I just have to wonder, how often do we limit what he really wants to do because we only see what's in front of us?